it's Jennifer from Flux. Welcome back to week 4 of our 2021 holiday crochet along. We have been hard at work on our folk art snowflake pillow. This is a cute little accent pillow that you can use around your home during the holiday season, and it's super easy to make, and we're kind of breaking it up and working on it every step of the way. Now this week we're going to be seaming our pillow, stuffing our pillow, and adding pom-poms to each corner, and I'm going to show you how to do every single part of that. Now, in case you missed it, you can hop on over to the blog or the main page of the channel and see any of the other parts that you missed. Now, last week we worked on the embroidery, the snowflake on the front of our pillow. The week before, we crocheted the 2 panels that made the main part of the pillow. And then the week before that, the first week of our cowl, we talked about the supplies needed. So if you missed any of those parts, you can go back and see the channel. They're all on there. And there's also a playlist for this cowl also. So without further ado, let's move on to the tutorial and learn how to kind of wrap up our project. And if you haven't joined our Ravelry group and our Facebook group, be sure and hop on over there. The links are down below. You can connect with other makers working on this project as well. It's a wonderful place to hang out, ask questions, you can show off your work and things like that. So the links down below are for that. Okay, today we're going to be covering quite a bit of ground here. We have our 2 panels. We have a plain panel, and then I embroidered a panel. We did the embroidery last week. The week before, we crocheted these 2 squares. And then the week before, we talked about supplies. So if you missed any of the links, they can be found on the blog and the channel if you need to go back and look at some of the other videos. So for today, we're going to do, basically we're going to assemble our entire pillow. So we have our, again, we have our 2 squares here. We have our red yarn. We're done with the cream color yarn. We're not going to use that anymore, and we used it up also as a side note. But we're going to use our red yarn to seam up the edges with a single crochet stitch, so it's going to look like some piping, some pillow piping. And then what we're going to do is stuff the pillow. Right when we get almost to the end of seaming, we'll stuff it and then seam the rest of it up. And then finally, we're going to be adding some pom-poms, 1 at each corner here for our pillow. So today, you're going to need your 2 squares, and you're going to need the yarn that you would like to use around the edge and for your pom-poms. You will need the same crochet hook we used before, the 9mm end crochet hook. I grabbed my scissors. I use these for just snipping little pieces of yarn, but I also grabbed a big pair because when I make pom-poms, we give them a little bit of a haircut to kind of shape them up. So I did grab some big scissors too to shape up my pom-poms. And you'll need a tapestry needle. And also, let me just grab it really quick. You're going to need whatever you want to stuff your pillow with. So I'm going to be using fiber fill, but we talked about this in week 1. You can use a pillow form or the stuffing. You could also use yarn scraps, cotton balls, pretty much whatever you have on hand. If you have some yarn remnants, you can kind of ball them up. Our fabric that we created with our single crochet stitches is pretty dense, so it will hide a lot. If you're using yarn scraps, just make sure when you do stuff it, if you're using a very contrasting color and stuffing your pillow, that it doesn't show through, okay? If it is showing through, try to stick with like lighter colors if you're doing like a cream color like I am. So what we're gonna do first is, let me scoot some of this out of the way. Again, we're going to do a single crochet stitch all the way around our pillow, almost to the end, and leave just a little hole to stuff it with, okay? So grab your hook and your pillow squares, and this is reversible. Because we worked in rows and did single crochet stitches, it's completely reversible. But you'll want to make sure that you line your squares up properly to begin. See how our rows go this way? You don't want to have one going up and down and one going side to side. So just make sure that part is lined up. Now we're not going to worry about our tails so much. If you want to weave them in, it's totally up to you, but we're going to tuck them in as we go. So we're not really going to worry about them too much. So stack your squares up, and we're going to start at this upper right corner. Now I wanted to point out, we are working, when we work across on our square, we are going to be working into stitches. When we work down the sides of our square, we're going to be working into these side spaces, and we're going to do this whole thing every step of the way so that you can see it being done, okay? So what you want to do is grab your yarn, I'm using red, it can be whatever color you want. You could do, I'm using the same color as my embroidery, but you could do like green or gold or something like that for your side seaming here. So we're going to do a single crochet seam. So what you want to do is locate that first stitch in that upper right hand corner, and see, if you look at it on the top view, you can see it's a little V, okay? You want to make sure you go in both of those loops. So insert your hook into both loops of that first stitch, go to your other layer here, and go into both loops of that other stitch. Make sure it's the same stitch, both on the ends here. Then what we're going to do is take our yarn, and we're going to be working, we're on in the upper right hand corner, we're going to work towards the left corner, okay? So take your yarn, and we're just going to hook it onto our hook, and we're going to pull it through both layers, just like that, and then we're just going to tie it right on. This is an instance where we want our seam to show, our single crochet seam, because it's going to be a nice frame for our beautiful embroidery, okay? So we have our ball of yarn, and I'm just going to pull a little bit out to start, and what we're going to do is, we're not going to worry about this tail either, we're just going to tuck that right in. So anytime you see a tail, just tuck it right in. Okay, so go back into that same 2 stitches that we tied the yarn into, bring up a loop, and we're going to chain 1, okay? Then we're going to go into the next stitch, and we're going to go into both layers. Make sure you pick up both of those loops, and let me just zoom in a little bit so you can see. Make sure you go into both of those loops. See, I have 2 loops on my hook. Go into that second panel, and I have 2 loops. Now what we're going to do is bring up a loop, wrap yarn around hook, bring it through both loops. And we have the very beginnings of our beautiful edging. Go into the next stitch, and then the next stitch on the bottom layer, bring up a loop, yarn around hook, bring it through both loops. You can see we're already getting some beautiful framework, okay? Next stitch. Now this top edge is going to be easy because it's very easy to see stitches. But when we go down the side stitches, we'll do that together as well. Okay, so just work a single crochet into both layers all the way across. And I'm using my left hand quite a bit here to kind of turn it towards me to see the stitches. Go in both of those layers. My left hand is holding the yarn, but it's also serving as a guide to help me go into both of those layers. And you want to make sure you're going into both layers, and you want to make sure everything stays nice and lined up as you go along. Whoops. Let me try that again. Go in both layers. Make sure you're picking up all 4 loops of those stitches. 2 loops for the top, 2 loops for the bottom. And we're going to move this backdrop in just a minute, just because we're getting more red on the edge and I want you to be able to see it. Okay, so moving right along, work into the next stitch, picking up both loops, next stitch. And as you can see, this is really fast and decorative way to seam up your pillow. Okay. The only sewing we're really doing here was our embroidery, which I found to be tons of fun. If you're not into embroidery, just as a side note, and I mentioned this last week, you can just skip that altogether and have a plain pillow. Or you could sew an applique onto it. It's totally up to you. Okay, we're just going in each stitch all the way across. Next layer, single crochet. And this edging is just so pretty. It really does frame in the whole pillow very nicely. Okay. Now we're going to be coming up to a corner. If we were just to put 1 stitch in the corner, it would sort of like pucker up the pillow and pull on it. So we're going to put a couple extras into the corner here. Whoops, there we go. Okay. So we also have a tail. When we get to this tail, what we're going to do is tuck those in as well. See our tails here? We're just going to tuck those in to the middle of the pillow. Okay, now we're at the corner. You can see that corner space there. Go into that corner. Go into the corner on the other layer. And we're going to work a single crochet and then another single crochet and then a third single crochet, and then a fourth single crochet. And that, putting a couple of stitches in that end there, is going to help. See how it just rounded the corner so nicely? It looks very pretty. Okay, we're going to turn our work. We're going to start working down the side. Now, you'll want to get a good look at the side before you start working into it. We have, at the end of each row here, you can see we have some holes. So at the end of this row, there's a hole. At the end of this row, there's a hole and a hole and a hole. Every hole that you see along the edge, they're not stitches this time, but they are like end holes, if you will. We're going to work into those, okay? Just a little bit different, but they are pretty easy to see. If you kind of pull it apart a little bit, you can pretty easily see those holes. So go into that first one, and we have a tail here, so I'm going to tuck that in. Go into the next one of the row, and just work your single crochet. Go into that next hole that you see, next hole, single crochet. And we're holding our squares together as we go. And this is why too, when I mentioned when we made these squares, why it's so important to make sure they're the same number of rows when you make your squares. So we're going to go in both layers, and you can see it still looks nice and neat along the edge, okay? So go into that one, go into that one, just work all the way down the side as well, okay? And it will make it nice and neat and frame it in. So your pillow will look beautifully finished when you're putting it out on display. Okay, we have enough red on this. I'm going to remove our red backdrop just because it's has the potential to be a little distracting to us now. Okay, so we're going to go in that layer, go in the bottom layer, work your single crochet. We're just doing this all the way across. Okay, just keep moving down, working into those holes. If you need to kind of look ahead and make sure things are lining up ahead of you, also do that. But we're just working into each one of those side holes, if you will, of our rows. Okay, so just keep going. We're getting towards the end here. And, straighten things out if you need to. Okay, and then once again, when you get to the edge, you're going to go in one layer, that next layer, and again, we're going to work 4 single crochets in the corner. So 1, 2, 3, and 4, okay? Now we have a tail, so we want to tuck that one in. And we're coming around. It's looking really cute. All right, so turn your work. Now we're going to work along the bottom. Okay, so when you have your starting chain too, it might be a little bit weird also, like when you had your sides as well. Might not be easy to see stitches, but you can see that there are holes all along the bottom where your chains were. And so you're just going to work all along the next side as well, locating those holes if you're working on your starting edge here. Okay, I like to straighten things out as I go. Okay, coming up to the end of that third side of our square, we're in a corner space again, so and I have a tail, so I'm going to tuck that tail in and also work 4 single crochets. Whoops, my yarn split. Work 4 single crochets in that corner space. Same thing we've been doing on every other corner. So 1, this tail is trying to jump out. 2, 3, and 4. Okay, it kind of rounds off that corner so nicely. Now we have our last side, and again, these are side spaces, so you're going to just handle it the same way we did this second side, okay? So make sure everything's lined up, and then we're just going to go into those side holes like we did before of the ends of each row, or the beginnings, however you want to look at it, okay? So go ahead with your single crochets down the last side of your square. Make sure everything's lined up, and what we're going to do is we're going to go about halfway because we need to stuff our pillow, okay? So we're going to take this about halfway in, working in those side holes. I'm going to get a little bit more yarn, and I don't like the way that stitch looked. Anytime you have a stitch that you're not crazy about, especially if you're working in a more challenging area like side spaces like this, sometimes you're going to have something that may not look nice to you, and you just pull it out and redo it and keep going. It's much easier to do it right then and there than to try and rip something out later. So always be mindful of that as you're working. All right, I am about halfway down, and I have just enough of an opening here to stuff my pillow. So I'm going to grab my fiber fill and rejoin, and we'll stuff our pillows next. Okay, when you're ready to stuff, we can move our hook out of the way for just a minute. And then we're going to grab our opening here. And here I grabbed a big handful of the fiber fill. Now, if you used a pillow form, you want to put the pillow form in before you get to this point, so you can slide it in, okay? If you're doing fiber fill like me, come in halfway. If you're doing a pillow form, stop at that 1, 2, 3rd corner and slide your pillow form in at this point, and then you can finish seaming it up, okay? Then what we're going to do is just go ahead, and my tip for this is it can get messy and kind of cumbersome. You don't want to get a big giant ball and stuff it in there. You want to work in small clumps and kind of stuff it down to the corners first. The trick is to get your pillow plump. You want it to be puffy and a cute little pillow, but you don't want it to be so overstuffed that it's going to distort your stitches. And likewise, I'm going to get a little bit more. I have a giant bag of this, so it wouldn't quite fit on my camera frame here. So I have it kind of off camera. But you don't want your pillow to be so full, though, that your stitches are going to get distorted. And so it's nice to strike up a balance. And I like to kind of go pretty slow on this just to get the right amount. And you won't really know until you start stuffing it and seeing how it looks. It's hard to know exactly how much you'll need for each project. Okay, so I'm just small clumps of this at a time. I'm just going in and stuffing my pillow. You can see it's getting a little 3D. And also account for the fact that your pillow will settle. And especially because this is a seasonal pillow, your pillow may also, when you store it, it may also flatten out a little bit, okay? So you want to give it some, make it nice and full. And then I can kind of stick my arm in there, and I want to get those corners nice and filled up too, because you don't want this big puffy part in the middle and like flat sides, okay? And then once you get a good amount of stuffing in there, I'm kind of like, you can't see it in because my hand's in the pillow, but I'm kind of like moving my fingers like this in the pillow to kind of distribute it evenly, okay? I'm almost like, it's almost like a mixer, a little mixer. I'm like kind of mixing it up a little bit. Okay, and then you also want to account for this end part, because if you don't put enough at the end, you'll have a flat side, okay? Now, what we're going to do, I feel okay with this, but what we're going to do is we're going to come back with our hook and get our hook back in that loop. And now it's a little puffier, so it might be a little bit more tricky, but we're going to seam this last part up. And before we finish all the way, what we're going to do is any last little bit of stuffing we want to put in this, we're going to do it before we completely close it up. So I'm going to get this seam mostly done. And then what we're going to do is just double check everything, okay? So I'm just getting that last little bit of my seaming finished, and I have just a few stitches left here. And I just want to check that last corner, because this is the corner that normally, see how it's pretty empty? That's the corner that normally you need to add a little bit more to. So we have an even smaller hole now. I'm just stuffing it so that it's in that corner. The reason I made it bigger before was so I could get my whole arm in there and kind of work it in. And again, we're just doing small little little tufts of it at a time, but I don't want to have one flat corner. So I want to get that in there. And again, I'm moving my fingers around so that it's gonna distribute everything evenly, okay? I'll tuck a little bit up here, and I feel happy about that. Maybe put a tiny little bit right in there, okay? I feel pretty happy about this, so I'm gonna go ahead and close it up. And our pillow has really gotten some dimension in this last little part of our tutorial. It's really starting to look very beautiful and elegant. Okay, so our last few stitches, and you might need to like really pick them up and see where you're at here. Go on both of those layers. Okay, and then I have one more tail, so I'm gonna very carefully, you might need to use your hook at this point, but if you have a tail at the end where you began like I do, see we have just a teeny little hole there, go ahead and just stuff that in the best you can. If you need help, you can use the back end of your hook or your scissors, just be careful not to cut anything. Okay, I'm gonna just tuck that last tail in there. See how easy that was to take care of our tails? And then we're gonna come back up here. And again, we did our hooks, our corners. Remember we did 4 single crochets in each corner. So here we are at the corner again. Go ahead and go, it might be a little snug. Let me just get this yarn ball out of the way. So go 1, 2, and I dropped my loop. That was 2, 3, and 4. Now, come around to that, remember that chain one we did at the beginning of the round? Come around to that chain one, and we're going to join with a slip stitch to close the round. So insert your hook into that first stitch worked, and work a slip stitch. Okay, so we closed the round with a slip stitch, and then what we're going to do is cut the yarn and fasten off. Now, this will be an end we have to weave in, but I'm going to show you, it's also super easy. We're going to take our tail, large tapestry needle, large enough to fit through the eye there, and we're just going to go, let's go into the back of the pillow. See, the back of the pillow looks just as pretty. We're going to go into the back stitch of this last stitch worked here. You might need to wiggle it a little bit, it's very thick, and we're just going to take it through the inside of the pillow, the very middle of the pillow, and just come out in a random area a couple inches in, okay? You know, it's a lot of bulk to work through here. And then what you can do is push that down a little bit. See how it pulled that up? Snip, and it's just disappeared into the center of the pillow. So once your pillow is done, you know, you want to shape it up very nicely, and it looks gorgeous. It's a beautiful pillow. I want to put a couple of pom-poms at all 4 corners of mine. Get those corners nice and sharp also. Get that stuffing nice and even. I'm going to put some pom-poms on mine. This is totally optional. You don't have to do this, but I'm going to show you how to do this and make a pom-pom with no fancy tools, just your hands. All right, let's slide this pillow up. We're going to begin, same red that we've been using. I'm going to cut a piece of yarn, I would say about 12 inches long. Then we're going to take our yarn, and we're going to run it down the front of our hand, and we're going to start wrapping it around all 4 fingers. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, and 45. So I'm wrapping mine 45 times. These aren't going to be huge pom-poms, but they will still be kind of puffy. All right, I'm going to cut the yarn, and then we're going to take the yarn that we cut a few minutes ago. I'm just going to lay it across the table here, and I'm going to carefully slip my hands out of this bundle that we created. And notice that the 2 ends are pointing down, and we're just going to kind of lay our bundle on here. Now, a little tip, if you have trouble, some people have trouble with their pom-poms coming apart. At this point, you could run some glue along this yarn here before you lay your bundle down on it, okay? Hot glue works really well. And that will, when you tie it like we're about to do, it will kind of lock all those ends and keep your pom-pom more secure. Okay, and we're going to just tie it as tight as you possibly can. You might need a helper for this if you can't get it too terribly tight. And just be careful not to break the yarn because you'll have to redo your bundle. Now we're going to, these two ends that we just tied, we're going to use them as a handle. And we're going to kind of puff this up and we're going to cut all of these loops. Okay? So go ahead and cut the loops. Careful not to cut that band that's holding them all together. Okay? Flip it around and we have more loops. So go ahead and cut those loops on this side. Now, as you can see, our pom-pom looks pretty crazy. It's not what we want it to look like at this point yet. You might get a lot of crumbs here. So I'm showing you this on camera, but really, I would recommend you do this over a trash can. Okay, so let's get our pom-pom under control. Looks kind of crazy right now. We're going to just take our scissors, and as you can see, the big scissors, you can see why they're helpful. And we just want to get, I'm going to cut it down pretty far because I want it to be dense. Now, if you want your pom-pom to be bigger or more dense, you can wrap it more times. I'm cutting it back pretty far because it was not as dense, but if your pom-pom is denser, you don't have to cut it back as far, so you can make it a little bit bigger that way. But I love pom-poms, especially these big festive red pom-poms for the holidays. All right, and then as you're working through your pom-pom, see all these crumbs? Look at all these crumbs that are falling off. This is why it's good to do it over a trash can. Actually, I'm going to move my pillow so I don't get all these crumbs all over that cream color yarn. It would really show. And see how when I fluffed it, it sort of pulls the plies apart of the yarn, and you can see if you have long pieces. See how my long pieces are? We want to get all of those. We want our pom-pom to be very uniform and dense looking. Okay? So go ahead and give it a nice trim. Keep fluffing and trimming, fluffing and trimming. You want to spend a little bit of time on this part just to make sure that your pom-pom is going to be nice and uniform looking. Okay, turning it in every direction, giving it a haircut. I find this to be a very satisfying activity, getting this pom-pom trimmed. Some people don't like making pom-poms. Do you like making pom-poms? Let me know in the comments below. Is it an activity that you enjoy, or is it not really your thing? Okay, I'm pretty happy with this pom-pom. Let's get just a few more here. All right, I'm going to clean my work surface, and then we're going to rejoin with the pillow, and I'm going to show you how to put it on. So let's put that aside, and we'll take care of this mess and rejoin in just a minute. Okay, so I'm back with my pillow, and let's put it on one of these corners. So I have here, again, my tapestry needle, and we're going to go into the corner here. Now, remember we did 4 single crochets in the corner? If you need to look at those, I have 1 on either side here, 1 on either side here. So this is the middle. So find the middle of your corner, and I just kind of marked it that way. And we're going to thread our needle. We're just going to pull that right on through, just like that. And we can tie this nice and secure. Tie that nice and tight. And if you want some added stability, I do this with hats. So if you've ever watched any of my pom-pom hat videos, I add an extra stitch in there just to secure it. So you can rethread that. I have it tied once, so you can retie that and just come in a little bit. See, I'm coming kind of to the base of that single crochet stitch. I'm just going to pull it, and while it's still threaded, just kind of come up under some of these stitches like that, okay? We don't want it to be all floppy. We want it to stay put. Now see how it still moves, but see how it just stays put like that a little bit better? Now, you can let that out, grab your other tail. We're going to do the same thing. We're sort of going to make an X. So we went this way. Let's try going across here to make a little bit of an X with our tails, okay? And then we're going to tie that a couple of times to make it nice and secure. And then what we can do is weave in the ends like we did before. Come in a little bit into your pillow, bring it back out, give it a tug, and a snip, and it sort of disappears. Then you're just going to do the same thing with the other tail. Just send it on through the pillow, come out a few inches in, and sort of smush it down and trim, and then it'll go away. Okay, so we have one pom-pom on. It looks super cute. Go ahead and repeat this for the other 3 corners, and we'll rejoin in just a moment. So our pillow is complete. Now you can go at your own pace, obviously, and work on as much as you want, and you can make this pillow as many times as you want. If you want to do like a set of them, if you wanted to do the same pillow in a couple different versions and so forth. So that is going to wrap up our 2021 holiday cowl. So I hope you enjoyed doing this folk art snowflake pillow. I sure did have a lot of fun making this. And so next week, I will put all the parts of the crochet along on a blog post. So you'll see all the videos in one place, all the links to the tutorials in one place. So you can have it all in one handy post. And I know a lot of you like to make the projects over and over, so you can have it in just one spot. So we're going to do like a reveal and recap for next week. If you haven't joined the Ravelry group and the Facebook group, the links are below. Be sure and hop on over there and connect with the other makers and ask questions. You can show off your work, and as you finish your projects, be sure and share those photos. And that's it. So I'll see you on the blog next week. We'll have the whole recap and reveal. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure and click the subscribe button to get all the latest Fiber Flux video updates. Thanks again.